Hi, I'm Jessica, the proactive caregiver, and I specialize in educating others on how to be proactive by empowering you, the caregiver. Because if you cannot take care of yourself, then you cannot take care of your loved one. And I have to admit, recently I felt like I was failing as a caregiver. We all know that it comes and goes. There are the highs and lows. But at this point in time, when I felt like I had figured so many things out and we were in a good space and I had my support network, something changed. So check this out. In a moment, I'm going to tell you about how mom was supposedly graduating off of hospice, how I responded to it, and what came out of this business, not medical decision. So earlier this year, in 2023, January, I get the phone call that I didn't expect to receive, that mom is graduating off of hospice. Mind you, she was readmitted last July 2022, and she has been steadily declining. She was already in late stage 5, early or part of into stage 6. So you can imagine how surprised I was when I got this call that she is graduating off of hospice. Now, I know that's possible. It is a thing. There are people who actually go on hospice and they improve. And they improve to the point where they are no longer able to remain on hospice. But this isn't the case for us. Mom is declining, and as heartbreaking as it is, I am slowly but surely coming to terms that her time is coming closer to the end than I ever imagined, and still to an extent, still not ready for. But I understand and I acknowledge, regardless of what I'm ready for, it is coming. So having that support network has been huge. Now, the problem with this decision was I completely disagreed with it, felt like I wasn't being heard, and the decision was going to be made regardless. I didn't sit back for that, and I couldn't sit back for that, because here's the thing. When they told me that one of their reasons was because she's still talking and she's not bad enough, that just made me want to roll up the sleeves and dig in the heels, because I have a plaque in my office that says, I am good enough. Can you imagine, over my years of feeling confident and comfortable as a caregiver, to suddenly hear she's got to come off of hospice because she's not bad enough? That's ridiculous to me, because in the moment that she was assessed, Mom was actually able to answer a question. Now, I can't tell you if it was a yes or no answer or a head nod, but apparently she used enough words for them to say, she's still talking. And I think many of you as caregivers, especially dementia caregivers, can absolutely agree and say what you see in a 20-minute time interval or an hour or even in one day does not represent entirely. So I had to argue that just because she's able to say she's hungry, or she has to use the restroom, or she wants something sweet, or even to give somebody a rude comment and tell someone that she thinks they're ugly, those were too many words for them. And that's just not right. The other thing that they were arguing about was that they didn't have a heart infraction available, or what is considered an EF, which is also the ejection fraction. Doesn't matter, regardless of what that means. You can Google it and figure it out, and some of you may even know exactly what that means because you've experienced this. But basically, they were making a decision without having all of the evidence, all of the proof. They were just claiming they didn't have this information. And the problem with that kind of information would be that I would have to get her off of hospice in order to take her to the doctor's office so that she could get preventative services and these tests could be run, because they are not going to provide that test themselves. But they were using that as their claim to why she was graduating off. Another one was that they did not see her losing enough weight. They had only, based on their report, she had only lost 2 pounds. Mind you, the report they were referring to was well over a month ago. And when I asked the question if they had weighed her recently, they had not. Making decisions, again, without all the information. So one afternoon I'm sitting there and I'm angry, upset, panicked, all these emotions at one time. And I ask one of the med aides, "How often do you visit my mom? How often do you spend time with her?" I knew she had been in there several days a week, but I was just curious. She confirms my suspicion. She sees mom 6 days a week, more days than I do at this point. And when I asked if she's talkative, if she looks like she's lost some weight to you, does she have enough energy, does she seem as winded to you as I see, because this is what I'm noticing, and every single thing that we discussed, we both agreed, we both saw it, and we both know what it means. She's definitely declining, and unfortunately this decline is coming faster now. I see changes by the week that she is weaker. She is just not as present as she once was. She's definitely getting to the point where I see in her face, in her eyes, that she's questioning who I am. So what does this all mean? How are they able to make a decision like this and not have all of the details? From what I understand and from what I know as a caregiver advocate, in 2023, Medicare raised their rates for providers. So it would be in their best interest to get her off of the hospice she was existing on as of 2022 rates and readmit her on the 2023 rates so they would get a higher rate. Now, mind you, that is my suspicion, but it's a pretty good one to make at this point, considering the decision that was going to be made without having medical data. The business data is there, and as an accountant, that mindset makes too much sense to me. The decision to drop her without having all this proper data made me feel angry, made me feel panicked, made me stress like I haven't in a very long time. This is that traumatic feeling that I had many years ago when mom was getting diagnosed early on, and I was trying to explain to my family members, mom's living with dementia, and the denial was there because they saw what they wanted to see. So now I'm fighting with people who are supposed to be supportive and who were originally helping to turn around and say they can no longer help her in this manner. They said the final decision was going to come up to the doctor, that the doctor had to evaluate and make this decision. Well, I reminded them, one, that the doctor, if he cannot recognize the obvious decline over a 6 months period, then it's time for a new doctor. It's time for a second opinion. And two, I was not afraid to go on to the Department of Health and Human Services to fill out a TULIP form to report this miscarriage of business, because it was not a medical decision. In fact, it wasn't a good medical decision at all. It was a business decision. Long story short, the conversations went back and forth, and I was able to advocate for mom and explain why their information was false, what else they needed to know in the process to make a better decision. She has now since been reapproved for hospice, even though their final argument was, if we take her off and she starts to be more symptomatic, we can put her back on. But I had to remind them, There's no point of taking her off just to wait and see, when by taking her off, it kicks off a chain of reaction of having to change medications, of who provides it when it comes in and out of the office, how often she's able to get it, and she's definitely going to decline in the process. So thankfully, the doctors and the nurses that evaluated her were able to compare notes thoroughly, and were able to come to the decision that she is in fact declining. And one of the final questions that I was asked, would you be surprised if she was gone in 6 months, if she had passed? I said no. I would not be surprised. And that seemed to be a deciding factor for them. At this point, my caregiver cage is rattled, because even though I was able to step forward and advocate for Mom, it did affect my trust in them just a little bit, because we are slowly feeling more comfortable that hospice is not only for the imminent death. Yes, I know she is in that process of winding down, but it may take a couple of more months. It may take right at or just after the 6 months. I don't know. It's not, from what I hope not, going to be in the next 24, 48 hours. But hospice is not just for that purpose. I've learned this. I've worked with 2 different companies at this point. I know this now. The ironic thing after all of this, going through this process and getting this punch in the gut, because that's what it really felt like, and then finally getting the feeling of victory, it didn't change the fact that Mom is still declining, but it made me realize that we have to advocate for our loved ones who cannot speak up for themselves. And that is the ironic thing after all of this was said and done. The very same people who were insisting they were going to take her off of hospice or have her graduate off of hospice were also congratulating me and thanking me for being such a wonderful advocate. You can understand why that was really hard to accept that compliment from them at this point in time, when it really caused me to second guess myself. And it was not only that punch in the gut, but it was a little bit of that confidence, like sucking it out of the room, confidence lost. I know there are many caregivers out there that are experiencing this. I know that it is not fair, and I definitely know these kind of decisions are not only medical decisions. We are dealing with enough as it is, with all of the changing areas with our loved one, all of their limitations and our limitations, to have to butt up against business decisions. It just doesn't seem fair. But it is what it is. So I want to challenge you to understand more than you think you need to, because when we wait till that last minute, we're in a position that we are trusting people that may not always have our loved ones' best interest at hand. Keep that in mind. This is a process of empowerment for a reason. I know many are dealing with this. I've heard many stories, and now I'm living that story. But I am staying hopeful, and I'm going to continue on this path, and I'm going to continue to advocate. And I hope it makes a difference for you, knowing you're not alone in this process if you have experienced this yourself. There are other ways around what you are hearing. It's just figuring out what those are. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, please be proactive and take care.